Now I'll introduce our speaker today. Mr. Phil Grodin has spent more than 15 years in the corporate world. He is currently a director of portfolio management at Monroe Capital, a $13 billion asset manager specializing in private credit. He got his idea for the book, Just Tell Me What I Need to Know, through managing dozens of young professionals and noticing that while they have never been better prepared to handle the technical elements of their career, no training manual or employee handbook provided them with guidance on the soft skills they needed for career success. He will share some of that guidance with you today. Phil received his bachelor's degree from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University and his MBA from Columbia Business School.
Thanks, Alfred, and I appreciate the introduction, and thank you all for joining me this evening. Really appreciate the time. I'm gonna pull up my presentation. Hopefully y'all can see it in a second. As Alfred mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the keys to early career success. And what I've noticed over the course of my career is that from a technical perspective, whether it be finance, accounting, or law, whatever, young professionals have never been better prepared for the workplace. I think that's a testament to school programs getting more focused on on-the-job training. Companies are more focused on providing the right assistance and the right training programs. So from a technical perspective, I've seen really the improvement, but from a soft skills perspective, which are extremely important to success, they're often ignored and just learned on the job. So what I set out to do, as Alfred mentioned, was write a guide which will help you understand the other side of success. Because I think there's a real focus on the technical side. But as you'll see in your career, having really strong technical skills will only take you so far. The people that you see rising to the top often do not shine from a technical perspective, but it's really the soft skills that get them to be sort of company leaders and have true success. So we're going to walk through a couple of different examples and a couple of different areas that I like to talk about. So first, I want to talk about the three things that all your managers want to see when you're a young professional. The first is competence, which is more than just getting things right. So of course, a big part of competence is not making mistakes and doing the job that you were asked to do. But it's really a lot more than that, and I'll talk more about what that means. The second is attitude. This is extremely important. People should enjoy working with you. No matter how strong you are in technical skills, if you have a bad attitude, people are not going to want to work with you and your performance is going to suffer. And finally, it's intellectual curiosity. This is so important. You need to show your manager that you really are interested and care about the job. If you come in every day, do a good job, and have a good attitude, you'll have job security. But what really sets you apart to be sort of a top performer, to get you promoted before everyone else and to rise up, is to show that you're really passionate and you want to learn more. So it's always asking for more, always asking to understand more. When you start out, you're going to be doing very small projects. It's going to be hard to know how it fits into the bigger picture. Having that intellectual curiosity, asking your manager how things fit, and always trying to learn more is really going to set yourself apart. As a young professional, when I started out my career, I was really focused on like it was a college assignment. I would get the work, asked of me, I would do it and submit it and then wait for the next thing. And I felt like if I kept getting everything right, I would get 100%, and that would be the key to my career. And I had a manager give me some feedback after a few months that really changed everything for me. He said, realize that it's your job to make everyone else's job easier. So that means always going the extra mile, always focused on taking as much off of your manager's plate as possible. And I have a really quick and simple example. So if you look at this little table, it's just high-level financials for 3 years. And if you look, it's revenue, expenses, and profit. And you can see that the numbers are technically correct, but it's really confusing. It's not formatted, right? It's really hard to see. And as a manager, I'd have to take time to kind of decipher this. So it only takes a second, but just formatting it like that, now it's really easy for me to interpret. This is a really simple example. It can be applied to anything. But when you're sending something out or when you're finishing a work product and you're going to send it to your manager, always ask yourself, is there some way that I can make it easier for them? Some way to take it to as far as possible, to minimize their amount of time. They will really appreciate that. That's more of what competence is. We're going to talk about a couple different concepts. First is how to present effectively, which is something I think young professionals struggle with a lot. I'm going to talk about briefly how to do this the right way. Because look, when you start out, you're probably not going to be presenting to 500 people, but you are going to present to your manager, you're going to present to your team. Even if it's one-on-one, you're still presenting. And it's incredibly important to present effectively beyond just information. Then we're going to talk about providing context. I'm going to talk a lot more about what this means in a minute. So presenting effectively. Here's what I see as sort of an average presentation for new professionals is presenting the facts. Especially in the finance world, saying, what revenues were, what expenses were, what profit was, just facts after facts after facts. It's very difficult as a manager to absorb that. There's no story. It's really hard, especially if I'm not as in the weeds as you, to really understand what you're saying. And I would recommend watching good people who present, and you'll see that they don't present a lot of facts. They understand them and they use them as support when relevant, but they don't just provide facts. So here's what to do to make it a great presentation. Like I said, telling a story. If you think about it, when someone's teaching you something, when you craft it as a story, it's much easier for you to remember it and understand it. So no matter what information you're presenting, tell it like a story rather than just facts. Provide slides or handouts, especially if there's a lot of numbers and information. If you're just rattling them off verbally, it's going to be really hard for your manager to comprehend it. If it's all on a piece of paper in a good sort of concise way, that'll really help them guide along with the presentation. Use facts for support. Like I said, facts are important, especially when there's a lot of numbers around. So you want to know these numbers cold. You want to know the story cold, but you don't have to present all of them. People can ask questions. It's not like they're going to grade you just on what you're saying. So it's okay to not give every little piece of information and let them ask questions about what's important to them, because you might not know what's important. So just give the story and then be ready to answer the questions. Finally, make a recommendation when you can. This is a great way to set yourself apart. It's very common for people to just want to convey that information, get out of there and let their manager make all the decisions, especially in a safe space when you're talking with just your manager, you're not in front of a large group of people. Give the presentation and then tell them what you think. And it's okay to be wrong. It's actually a good thing. Your manager will appreciate that you took a chance and you're going to learn something. If you just keep quiet, you're never going to learn and you're never going to see what the right thing is. So say, based on the information, here's what I think we can do. And if you're wrong, ask them to explain why, so that next time you'll know how. People understand that you're new, they understand that you're young, and taking chances is a good thing. No one expects you to be perfect. So really kind of put yourself out there and make a recommendation whenever you can. Providing context. This is extremely important, and let me explain exactly what it means with an example from my career. So this was the first professional email I think I sent. I was working as a consultant. We just got a new client, and my manager asked me to send an email to the CFO of our client, asking them for a specific amount of financial data so that we can do analysis on the company. So I just sent this simple email. I just said, Tom, please send the company financials, best Phil. And I thought, this is a great email. It's nice and polite. It's concise, so I'm not wasting his time because he's the CFO of a company. I got an email very quickly from my manager kind of explaining where I went wrong. So I'm going to walk you through it. We're going to take it from the perspective of Tom, who is the CFO of the client. So when you get an email like this, he's going to be asking himself a bunch of questions, which are not good questions. First, he's going to say, who is this? I did not identify myself. He has no idea who I am. We've never met before. So he's going to say, is this spam? What is this for? I have no idea. And since he's a busy person, he might just delete it or file it away. He's going to say, what exactly does he need? This is a very broad, nondescript request. Be extremely specific when you're emailing someone or talking to someone in what exactly you need so that they don't get you the wrong thing or so they have to ask clarifying questions. Be extremely specific. Why does he need it? This is actually important too, because you'll find that when you provide the why, the other person might actually have a better starting place. And I'll explain exactly what I mean on the next page. And then when does he need it? I often see this with young professionals. They just send it out with no deadlines. Even if there isn't a hard one, try to create one. Otherwise, again, they're going to file this and put it at the bottom of their list. If you give them a deadline, then they're going to try to meet that deadline. So here's what I should have done. Here's the email. The subject line is more specific. And I said, "Hi, Tom. I'll be working with Sarah. Sarah was my manager, and I knew Sarah had already met Tom, so he knows that. So now he knows exactly who I am on our upcoming engagement together. To get started, would you mind sending over the company's income statement for the last 3 years so we can start to analyze the cost structure? To stay on our timeline, we'd like to get started with the analysis on Thursday. Please let us know if you won't be able to send the information by then." When you send emails like this, you're going to get the information much quicker, much more efficiently, and your manager will notice this. This will set you apart from a lot of young professionals. All right, moving on to attitude. This is an extremely easy thing to do. Anyone can give attitude. So I would recommend, don't ignore this and don't underestimate how important it can be. Always ask yourself, do people enjoy working with me? Obviously, there's professionalism, but they should genuinely like working with you. There's nothing wrong with enjoying working with your employees, and having a good attitude is the way to do that. So we're going to talk about when things don't go well, because I find that young professionals often struggle and they don't know how to handle when things don't go well. We're also going to talk about how your career is not a race, and I'll explain what that means. So when things don't go well, this can mean a bunch of things. Making a mistake, didn't know the answer to a question that your manager asked, or you missed a deadline. It doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, something went wrong, but how you handle it is really more important than the mistake itself. So what do? First, take responsibility. This is key. I see young professionals all the time coming up with excuses. They may even be valid, but just accept responsibility. You made a mistake and you're going to learn from it, which is the next thing. Understand why you made that mistake, how you can avoid it in the future. But people tend to have some flexibility when you make the first mistake, but they really don't like when you do it again. So that's why it's really important to learn from it. People will understand again that you're new, but I find, especially as a manager, when someone makes a mistake and handles it well, I actually have a positive impression of them, which I know is extremely counterintuitive. And the natural inclination is to excuse away why something went wrong. Your manager is just going to get frustrated. They're going to dig in. They're going to ask more questions. Just say, "Yep, I made that mistake. That's my bad, but I'm going to fix it." Or, "I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to go research it and get that answer. Missed a deadline. I apologize. It'll never happen again." They're really simple. It's really easy. You'll even see people as high as the CEO making these sorts of statements because they understand when you try to deflect, it just makes things worse. So always remember, accept responsibility. It's not a race. When I started my career, I feel like I kind of looked like one of these people. I was a new consultant. I was 22, and I said, by the time I'm 35, I'm going to be, a managing director at the company, the highest level possible. I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to rise up as quickly as possible. My career, of course, has taken a number of winds and roads, and that's a good thing. So don't be these people. First, see your peers as resources. Don't see them as competition. I know, especially in school, when there's a curve and things like that, but see them as a resource. There's a story in my book of when I was starting out, there was another person who started with me who was way ahead of me. A lot of people got kind of down on him. They were frustrated. We ended up becoming friends, and I used him as a resource, and he actually taught me a bunch of things that made me a better professional. So see people as resources, not as competition. And that goes both ways. If you're ahead or you understand something that someone doesn't, show them how to do it, help them. Managers will notice this, they will take note, and they will see sort of potential in you to be a manager when you can sort of help them. A lot of people are really possessive. They don't want people to help people because then they feel like they'll get behind. But I promise you, this will pay off in a number of different ways. Everyone can win. This is another thing, especially when you work on team projects. Don't feel like you have to be the star of the team, especially when you're new. That's not going to happen. Let everyone kind of fill in their role. And when the project goes well, everyone's just going to remember that you were part of that team and that it went well. No one's going to remember who did what. So don't try to hoard the credit. You'll see really good managers will oftentimes share credit with their team, even if it wasn't necessarily, they weren't even the key person. But that happens all the time, and I like to do that. It makes people feel good. Everybody can win on a project, and when a project goes bad, everyone's going to remember it to the negative. They're not going to remember the specific work you did. So be a team player. I promise you, even in the competitive world of finance, this is the way to success. It's not trying to sort of outshine everyone. You'll lose resources. You won't be able to build a network, which I'll talk about later. It will not help your career. And finally, missed opportunities. I was laser focused on being a managing director at my company, but that really siloed me into one position in one field with nothing else. I quickly realized that that wasn't the right thing. And if you look at my career trajectory, my first job, I ended up transferring into another group after 2 years. Then I left and went to business school, went to another company, worked in 2 different divisions there. The next company, 2 different divisions. I've been sort of all over the place. And what that's given me is a very diverse skill set. So what you'll see is people who work in one job their whole career, they start to plateau and they start to miss out because they only know how to do one thing. And especially when you start to rise up, you need a lot of different skill sets, mostly on the soft skills, and you don't develop that and you're only in one role. So always be open to new opportunities. There were times when I could have stayed at a job for another 6 or 9 months and got a promotion, and I forewent that, went to a different company, and ended up taking me a few years to get another promotion, but I have no regrets, and it put me in the position that I am today. So intellectual curiosity, always look to learn more. It's really easy, especially when you start out, if you're sort of the rock star, you're the top performer, you feel like you know everything. There's no way that you know everything about everything. There's always more to learn. So don't just say, I did my job great, I got it perfect, I can just kind of sit and relax. Always say, can I work on different projects? Can I see different aspects of the project that I'm not seeing? How does my work fit in? All these types of questions. I have a really good chapter about this in my book, talks about that, but always try to learn more. Managers see this all the time, and this is how they pick sort of their rising stars. It's not the technical abilities, it's intellectual curiosity, because they want people they know are passionate about the job, who love coming in every day and who always want to expand. If you're content exactly where you are, you're never going to rise up. So we're going to talk about 2 different things: how to network the right way, which is extremely important to building a successful career. And we're going to talk about not being afraid to fail, which I find is a really common issue for young professionals. So first, networking the right way. A story of my career to illustrate the power of the network. I'm sure you've heard about this in college, young professionals, they say network, network, network. There's a right way and a wrong way to network. So I'm going to give you a story that'll help kind of illustrate that. So I started my career in 2006. And if you recall, in 2008 and 2009 was the Great Recession here. But in 2006, things were going well, really well in the economy. I had a really good job in consulting. Our group was sort of the rock star group of the company. We were the biggest, we were making the most money. Everyone was working really long hours, but it was a really great experience and I was learning a lot, but most people just kind of put their head down. They were working, 60, 80 hours and they just felt like that was sufficient. When I started out though, I made a connection through orientation with someone in a different group. And this was sort of the group that handles working with companies when they were distressed. So when things are going bad. The economy was so great that there weren't a lot of companies that were distressed. So this group was really slow and not a lot of people really wanted to work in it. But I thought it was interesting. So I started learning more about it. I ended up becoming friendly with this person, started to go to lunch with him. He invited his team. I became friendly with the whole team. I actually even joined their baseball league on the side, just socially. But it was never really me trying to angle for a career reason. I was very happy in my current group. And like I said, that was the place to be. The head of that, the distress group, ended up noticing me hanging around and we became sort of cordial. We talked a little bit. He was asking about my interests. I always asked him about the group just because I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to learn about a different group in the company. 2008 hit, of course, things started to change. And what happened was I was in the office one day on a Saturday, kind of finishing up some work. And the head of the group kind of from the distress group came in and sort of picked me up and said, hey, I need you to help on a project. We need someone, we're getting, light on resources. We'd like for you. And the only reason he picked me is because, obviously we had a relationship from before. It was a really high profile project. Actually got to work a little bit with our CEO, which most young professionals didn't get to do. And it was a really great experience and I really loved the work. But after that, I went back to my group and kind of thought that was the end of it. As 2008 went into 2009, my group, that was sort of the shining star, was actually starting to go through layoffs because our clients had all dried up and there really wasn't any work. And the distress group started to get really busy. And one day I got a call from that group head and he said, hey, we're looking to hire. And normally we would hire from the outside, but we have a relationship and I liked working with you on that project. Would you be interested in coming aboard? And at that point, of course, it was an interesting job, but also it was the right place to be in the recession because everyone was really afraid about losing their jobs. So I was really fortunate, and most of my colleagues from my prior group ended up either losing their jobs or had to move on. And it had nothing to do with me being the best analyst, which I certainly wasn't. It was all because of networking. But I want to give you a couple sort of key parts of networking the right way, because I think we're taught to just network and we're not taught how to do it exactly. So first is being genuine. I think this is extremely important. Walking into a room and having forced conversations that feel awkward. If they feel awkward for you, they probably feel awkward for them. That's not building a network. Just be yourself. Don't look at it, as an opportunity to further your career. Just be yourself and just start networking. And like I said, so along those lines is don't selectively network. So don't only look for, the most senior people in the room and network with them. You have no idea how peers can be valuable to your resource. I've had peers help me get jobs. I've had, peers who just became, good friends. Peers have helped me win clients in the future. You never know how people are going to help you. So don't selectively network. Just always continue to build relationships with people. The bigger your network, the better. It isn't a numbers game. So the bigger your network, obviously the better. But I see tons of young professionals who just kind of LinkedIn people. So I'll get LinkedIn messages, to connect. I'll connect, they won't reach out. And they're just kind of building in their LinkedIn network. That's not building a real network because I don't know that person. I don't really know how I can help them or they can help me. It's just showing that your LinkedIn profile has a lot of connections. So make genuine connections. More is better, but do more the right way. And like I said earlier, relationships can take many different forms. So don't only see people and how they can help your career. I think I mentioned I joined the softball league with that group, which is a lot of fun, and I made a lot of good friends. A lot of my friends that I have today are because I networked in my job, and they just became friends. And I don't know if they'll ever help my career, but that they don't necessarily need to. So it's okay to have relationships with people in different forms. It doesn't only have to be 100% professional. And finally, keep in touch. It's really important, especially when you leave your job or they leave the job and you're not seeing them as much. You don't need to touch base with them every week or every month or even every quarter. But try to do lunches with people. Just say, hey, it's been a while. Would love to catch up. Go have lunch with them. Check how their new job is, what they're up to, because you never know when that'll come be useful. But just like I said, always keep in touch and try to see it as you're making friends in the real world. That's kind of what networking is. Don't feel like it has to be forced. You have to be overly professional. You'll see the best networkers are fun, they're outgoing, they're just being themselves. So just be yourself, and I promise you it'll be a more effective way to network. Don't be afraid to fail. So I think this is one of the most common reasons why people are afraid of intellectual curiosity. They kind of view their job, I think I mentioned this earlier, as a test, and they just want to get everything right. it's okay to make mistakes. It's actually encouraged because the more risks you're taking, you're going to make mistakes. But if you're showing your boss that you want to try something new, it's okay to be, to not get it perfectly. It's okay. And you're learning something new. So you're growing that way. You don't have to know everything. People can teach you things. So step outside your comfort zone. There's tons of good stories about this in my book. But if you're doing one thing and you're doing great, I would recommend trying something new in your job. If you're really good at one skill, focus on another thing. It's just like working out. If you're working out one part of your body, you got to kind of balance that out. It's okay to kind of step out of your comfort zone and try something new, even if it's something that you're not good at, because as you rise up, it's going to be really important that you have a broad range of skills, or you're going to hit that glass ceiling and you're not going to be able to rise out of middle management. Manage expectations. So, you want to try something new, tell them your skills. Say, hey, I took one class in college, but I don't really know much about this, but I really want to learn about it. That'll manage their expectations so that they know it's not going to be the greatest work product right away. But it's totally okay to say that because you're trying to help, you're trying to do more. So it's completely fine to manage expectations. Don't pretend like you know everything and then scramble, because if you do, they're going to expect it to be perfect and you're not going to deliver. Don't get frustrated. Like I said in the beginning, even for maybe years, it's going to take some time, especially, if you're working with people more senior than you, it's going to feel like everything's really easy for them. It's just because they've been around for a lot longer than you and you're the new person. So don't get frustrated and keep pushing and keep learning and keep growing. And like I mentioned earlier, this can have a major career impact. Stepping outside your comfort zone and doing other things, you have no idea. I've seen tons of times people take on projects in a different group, then an opportunity comes up, like I had my story, from the slide before. This happens all the time. So this could have a really major career impact. So just don't be afraid to fail. Don't view your career like a test where you're getting scored on everything. So just going to sort of final thoughts, I think there's really two questions that managers sort of subconsciously are asking themselves about you, believe it or not. The first one is, can I trust you to get the job done right? And I talk a lot about trust in my book, but really they have to know that they can trust you. And that's not going to happen right off the bat. But when a manager knows that you can do the work product without them having to check it, or you can go into the room with the client and handle yourself, that's how you're going to start to further your career. And that's what competence is. And what that's going to get you is more freedom and more responsibility. So they're not going to be checking your work as closely or even not at all. They're going to give you more responsibilities. You're going to get to do new and exciting things. This is extremely important. Second is it worth my time to invest in your career? So you can be, the most competent person, the best technical skills, but if you don't have the attitude and the curiosity, it's very hard for a manager to take an interest in your career. And the reason why that's really important is they're going to become a mentor and a champion. And these are two extremely important things. You've probably heard more about a mentor than champion. I'll explain what both are. A mentor, of course, is someone that you can go to for guidance. They can provide support and sort of teach you almost like a coach. Anytime you can get this, it's extremely great. And you might get multiple mentors. But what a champion is someone who's going to fight for you in the room when it's comp time, it's promotion time, when it's project, who's going to get what project. This is a person who's going to fight for you to get you those opportunities. And that's really how you get ahead. That doesn't come from just competence. Yeah, competence is important, but you have to show attitude and curiosity. And if you can show all these things, you'll have a champion who will be fighting for you, and you will see your career moving a lot quicker and a lot better. My book is Just Tell Me What I Need to Know. It's a collection of all the stories and lessons that I've learned throughout my career, all the things that I wish I had known when I was a young professional, but learned the hard way. So now you can kind of learn it the easy way, and have had very good feedback from a lot of young professionals. So highly recommend that you check it out. So with that, I know I've spoken a lot, and I've seen a number of chats go through on the question box. So I think now would be a good time to move for questions.
To thank Phil for your informative and insightful presentation. We all learned a lot from it. And I would like to pose two questions as the moderator before we entertain questions from the floor. And that is in your presentation, you outlined competence, attitude, and curiosity as three major skill areas that young professionals should seek further development. Which do you think presents the most challenge to young professionals and why? And what tips would you give to the young professionals to be able to overcome these associated challenges? And second, in terms of the conflict, managing conflicts, how do you often find motivation amid setbacks or conflicts or controversy? Thank you.
Yeah, those are great questions. So I'll start with the first one. I think to answer the opposite of your question first, attitude is the easiest, right? It's the easiest to come in every day with a positive attitude. So I'll say that. I think in the beginning, and it makes sense, you're really focused on competence. You're really trying to make sure that you're doing everything right. I think the challenge comes is shifting that mindset from treating it like an exam or treating it like you're just putting out a work product that needs to be right into being a real team member. That mindset I find young professionals really struggle with, and it won't come overnight because we've spent so many years in school being taught that we shouldn't go above and beyond. We should do exactly what the test asks us. We shouldn't be asking a bunch of questions that aren't applicable. We just need to get the score right. So it's a very different mindset. And like I said, I struggled with this for years, and most young professionals do. So don't get frustrated, but really ask yourself, am I being a good team member? Am I helping as much as possible? Is there something more that I can do? And it's okay in the beginning if you don't know how to do any of that, just ask a lot of questions. And you'll see good managers will be engaged by that and get excited about that and will feed off of that. But it's okay in the beginning when you don't know what to do to just say, can I do more? Especially, you're leaving at 5 o'clock because your work is done, the rest of the team is there. Say, hey, is there anything else I can do, or how else can I help? I see you guys are here staying late. What can I do to help? Don't just focus on exactly what's in front of you, and don't wait for the next thing. Always be proactive. So I find that can be a huge challenge, especially for new professionals. On the second question, in terms of conflict resolution, we see a lot of, in social media and Hollywood, there's a lot of yelling and screaming, especially in business. A lot of bluffing and things like that. I've been in, multi-billion-dollar deals and been in the room for a lot of them and seen all of it. And I frankly just don't see that very often. There's outliers who act that way. But in terms of conflict resolution, I would say be open, be direct, listen to what other people are saying. You have your perspective. So a very common example I've seen for young professionals to have to get information from another group in a company. It's a very simple, it seems like a very simple task. Ask the accounting department for the numbers and then we'll go analyze them. And I see young professionals struggle because they'll send out that email and they won't get a response. And the other team will sort of blow them off. And I have a really good story about this in my book and how I kind of work through that. But I see people get really frustrated. They send more snarky emails. They get more and more angry. See it from their perspective. They're probably extremely busy. They have a lot of things. This isn't the highest on their priority list. Be nice to them. Strike up a relationship with them. I always say that in person is better than the phone, which is better than email and chatting. Especially in this day and age, people love to chat and email. They don't get up from their desk. I'm up from my desk all day. I'm up and down. I go to people's offices. I'm talking to them. If you develop relationships with people and they like you, it's amazing how much more they will help you and less likely you're going to have some conflicts with them.
And I guess a related issue is when you were a young professional, when you served as a more junior colleague, how did you balance the trade-offs between yielding versus standing your ground? Was it always easy or a rational choice, or did you have to go deep inside and balance your priorities and values?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think in the beginning, you'll find most of the time you're probably wrong just because you're new. And that's okay. You might think something and then your manager will tell you another thing. I would say in the beginning, be very open and really try to understand why they're telling you things. And it might be hard to understand it, and it might be frustrating. Um, if you have a manager who isn't as open to explaining it, I would say first, if they are open, always ask, ask, hey, I'm just trying to understand why you're doing that. Not in a complaining way, not in a pushback way, just you want to understand so you want to grow. If your manager is a little more challenging and maybe not as open, ask peers, people who have been there a year or two, say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't understand why he's making me do this. This seems like a waste of time. They might have an answer. But like I said, 9 times out of 10, you're still getting up to speed with the process. You're a very small part of the process. So oftentimes they might say, we need this done by this date. It has to be done. You panic, you finish it by that deadline, and then you find out that it wasn't needed. What you might not know, especially in client services, is the client might have been asking for it and demanding it, and then the client changed their mind, which unfortunately they can do because they're the client. But your manager is kind of in the middle of that, and he has to manage the client in an appropriate way, and he can't always push back. So you may get frustrated with that, but there's a lot of other things at play. Obviously, I think you might have mentioned this. If there's something that you have an issue with values, that's a little bit different, and that's maybe a conversation you'd want to have with your manager. That's not something I thankfully have had to run into very often. But if it truly goes against your values or something that you feel is truly wrong and you don't think can be rectified, I think be proactive to look for either another group in the company or looking for another opportunity, because I know a lot of young people think they can change the world, and I think it's a great mindset to work on that. But especially in large companies, it can be very difficult. And if you don't feel like you fit with that company, there's nothing wrong with moving on somewhere else, or like I said, in a different group. Because in big companies, you'll find even group to group will have very different cultures and values, maybe even manager to manager.
Thank you for your response, Phil. And, I see a question from Chia, so I'd like to invite him to pose his question to Phil.
I remember when I first started my career, I often find myself in situations in which I'm staffed on multiple projects. Are there effective ways you think or recommend in terms of saying no to a manager or pushing back? How do you approach a situation like this?
It's a great question, and there's a whole chapter in my book on that. So that's a really spot on. So this happens, especially when you're in client services or when you're project based. You might have multiple managers, even not just multiple projects. So manager A might not know what manager B is doing. And what I often see is that people will just say yes to everything, and then they'll miss deadlines, and managers will get extremely frustrated. Things will get sort of slipped. So what I recommend is being extremely open and honest with your managers. Don't say necessarily, no, but saying, hey, different manager has me on this assignment. I need to work on this between now and 5 o'clock. So for the rest of the day, because he told me that it needs to be done by 5 o'clock. What you're presenting with me, I can certainly start on that tomorrow morning or even tonight, but I'm not really available. If that's an issue, I think we should go talk with that other manager. That happens all the time, where two managers will have to talk about it because they won't know about each other. And maybe manager B is right. Maybe that is more important. And when they talk with manager A, that'll flip it. You're not in a position to really rank or prioritize things. So just be extremely open and honest, and don't just say yes to everything, especially when you know you can't hit it. But don't say no. Don't get frustrated. Just be open and communicative, and get everyone involved, get everyone on the same page.
Alex, would you like to present your question to Phil?
Earlier in the presentation, there was a section where we talked about not saying no to new opportunities and exploring new jobs or roles.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of had a similar kind of situation in my career. I've had 3 jobs in like 4.5 years doing different things. I've definitely learned a lot and met a lot of new people. However, when I do make that switch, I tend to be pretty green in whatever area or project I'm working on. And so my immediate impact might not be as great as someone who's stuck on the same team for 4 or 5 years. And what I've observed in some peers is that from sticking with company A for 4 or 5 years, they've been promoted to senior or manager positions. And while I've certainly had a lot of experiences, I'm kind of still stuck in like mid-level, mid-career kind of roles. Do you have any tips or advice on how we can kind of balance that going forward?
Yeah, I think Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it really goes to priorities. If your goal is to just simply rise up as quickly as possible, then I think staying at the same role is what you do. But I think, as you can see from my career trajectory, that was not a priority for me. For me, it was building out the career the right way so that I can continue to grow and continue to rise up. I'll tell you that going to business school probably set me back a number of years in terms of titles. But in terms of the job that I have today, the title, really everything that comes along with it, there's no way I wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't have done what I had done. So it is frustrating. And I know it feels like continually you're always starting at the bottom, but at some point you're going to start to see it all come together. And I would really push you to not focus on what other people are doing and how, looking at their LinkedIn, it's very tempting to kind of scroll through and say, I went to college with him and he's already a managing director and I'm still an analyst, or he owns his own company. It's your career and it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. If you like what you're doing and you want to continue to rise up in that role, absolutely keep doing that. And you can start to take on more responsibilities in that role. So you don't have to keep, jumping to new jobs. But I knew in a lot of my first couple careers that it was not what I wanted to do long term. I stayed long enough to learn enough. And then I felt like I had plateaued and I could have coasted, and sort of risen up and done the same thing for the rest of my career. But that's not what I wanted. So like I said, my titles were not commiserate with some of my peers because of that. And I think that's a great thing. I think, like I said, you'll see as you get sort of mid-level, you'll see those people will really struggle. One, they're young, so they don't have a ton of experience, but they'll really struggle because they're going to have such a limited skill set, and getting up into the upper tiers is going to be a real challenge for them.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Phil and Alex.
What do you suggest as an effective way to ask for either a promotion or a title change? Whether
Yeah.
you're earlier in your career or you're more of a mid-level, how do you balance and convey that message in a way that is persuasive, convincing, and increase your visibility in that conversation?
It's a great question, and I think it's on all minds of young professionals, right? As I want to get promoted, or other people getting promoted, how I get promoted. I would say focus on adding more value first. So make sure you are doing a great job at what you're doing, what your role is, and then take on more and take on more and continue to be more value, and basically force them to get promoted. Now, ask them, how are the ways that I can improve to help me get ready for that promotion? So what do I need to do to get promoted? Rather than saying, I want to be promoted, I feel like I'm deserving of promotion. Especially when you're in your formal review, or even, informally saying, hey, I'm an analyst, I want to be an associate. What do I need to do to be an associate, and how can I do it? Where are the opportunities? So now you're not putting them in an uncomfortable position where maybe you're not ready and they have to explain it. You're saying, I want to know how to do this, help me get there, and I'll do the work. And then make sure you kind of follow those milestones, right? I mean, it can be frustrating in big companies. Sometimes there's policies, there's year requirements and things like that. You can't control any of that. Don't worry about any of all that. But look at all the boxes that you need to check to be promoted, and focus on checking all those boxes. That's the way I would focus on it, rather than saying at the end of the year, hey, it looks like I got really high marks. Why am I not promoted? Realize that those marks are based on your existing role. To get promoted, you have to be good at the next job, which is different than your existing job. So there's different skills. So you may have 5 out of 5 on every single box as an analyst, but there's very different things that you need to be good at to be an associate. So that's what you need to ask, and how to get to those positions, rather than just saying, hey, I deserve a promotion, or I want a promotion.
Nanhua, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Phil. Thank you so much for all your presentation. That was really insightful. I just wonder, because I just recently started my career at a international corporate, and then I found myself caught in the middle like of some office politics, and I've never worked in like a big corporate before, and I'm also like fresh out of school. So in a lot of cases, I would not know how to respond to people's like saying things about that. So I was wondering if you have any advice to young employees about when those moments happen.
Yeah, and I can only speculate. So what it is, but I can probably guess somewhat. Especially if you're dealing with maybe two managers who don't like each other,
Yep.
and they're putting you in an uncomfortable position. It's a very difficult position. I've been in it before. I would say try to rise above it and don't get into it, but at the same time, be respectful of your managers, right? Like, so if they're gonna spend time sort of dumping on the other one, listen politely, say you understand, but just be polite about it. Don't take sides. Don't start talking about other people. Sorry, go ahead if you have a
No,
clarifying part of the question.
no. I was just commenting because
Okay.
I feel like as a young employee, it's like we have to spend so much time learning about all these new stuff, and then when these side stuff come on, it makes the situation really tough.
Absolutely, it's not fun, and if it's something that will not go away. Unfortunately, I mean, there are a lot of great companies and a lot of great people. So hopefully, this is the worst experience you ever have. Thankfully, I've found a good environment where I am today, and I've found a lot of good environments. But it doesn't always play out that way. And it's not something where you want to just say, "Hey, it's a bad situation, so I'm going to quit," or "I'm going to immediately kind of look for another job or even another group." If you think it's a really good opportunity, you feel like you're learning and this is getting in the way of that, like I said, try to really put your head down and see this is an opportunity to learn. But do a lot more listening than talking when it comes to politics. See how people react, see how people make mistakes and internalize those, because that can certainly be helpful for your future. Look, unfortunately, office politics can be important. So again, like, much more listening than talking. Don't really take sides. And unfortunately, you're probably going to be in some uncomfortable positions, and you'll kind of have to swallow your tongue, once in a while. But hopefully that's helpful. And no job is forever. So if it's something that you feel like you truly can't overcome, I would say stick it out as long as you can, especially if it's a good learning opportunity and you feel like you're growing from a professional standpoint. And then on the side, start to look for new opportunities if it's something you truly can't overcome.
Yeah, thank
Thanks
you.
again for the insight, Phil, as well as to Lanhua for the question. Also, I'd like to say that we continue to engage with our scholars during and after college, and the scholarship fosters a culture of giving back, encouraging and supporting scholars not only to achieve their own success, but also to give back to the community. As a nonprofit organization, all contributions are tax deductible to the extent permitted by law, and we'll use all our proceeds towards scholarships for qualified students to help them achieve the fullest potential. And last but not least, I'd like to extend our appreciation and gratitude again to Mr. Phil Grodin for joining us tonight and for his insights. And
if you have any other questions, reach out to these guys, and I'm happy to answer them offline or through email or something to that effect. But it's been great, and thanks again.